Because you know the way you always want to like see exactly what the tab is before you close it, and of
Yeah.
course that gives whatever video or whatever was there time to load and start playing. You're like, oh god. So I had to keep everything on mute just in case.
Just in
Yeah.
case.
Good idea.
All right. Yeah. So, quick question. With the snowstorm, are you basically kind of stuck because, preferably, you don't want to drive anywhere, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, so like if I have to drive anywhere, I can. It's just that like you said, preferably, um, I'd rather not because, like I said, my car drives pretty pretty well in the snow actually. Even in the worst conditions. But when I went out there, I don't think I've ever driven in snow this bad. Um, like usually I can just kind of dart through the snow with ease. Like it's not any problems. And there's a mechanism in my car um, wherein if I start to slide, it'll kick back by itself.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, so I have that, and usually I can just, like I said, dart through the snow if I want to. But I'm pretty careful, and I mean, when I went out there, I was literally having to like drift and shit to like drive. Like I was having to like scoot this way, scoot this way, scoot this way, and I was like, yeah, this is. I think I'm a little bit stuck.
Excuse me. Wow.
But yeah, we're over here at my in-laws' house, and their power went out for a couple minutes, and
It's good times.
yeah.
All right, so I don't know. They're probably still getting ready.
Yeah.
All right, so we're talking about free will,
Ooh.
right? That wait, was
Yeah.
that going to be the topic?
Yeah. Oh, well, maybe I'm trying to think. So, would this be? Oh, it's already complicated in my head. So,
She's here.
there are like different philosophical, I guess, ways of looking at like free will and determinism, and there's like indeterminism and then compatibilism. So, hey, Rebecca.
Hey.
But yeah. So I don't know if we're speaking on like philosophical terms or like how this particular thing would be true in a scientific way, or I don't know if we're just kind of having an open conversation about it. Like,
Yeah, I mean, just based
and then
on how the conversation was going in the chat, it seemed
yeah, and
like
then
we're
like
going to talk about it. So bump it.
I was gonna say, like who believes in what? Like, that's what I'd like to gauge.
So
I believe that the conversation about physics has absolutely nothing to do with the conversation about free will, which um, which is a conversation that I think I usually get a lot of pushback on. But yeah, like as in, I think there's a whole load of different ways you can talk about it. I know everybody gives Sam shit because he keeps talking about those experiments that like, and everybody goes, "Oh, these experiments have been shown to be wrong in whatever ways." Like people
Mm.
have been throwing that at him for years, and it
Mm.
hasn't changed his mind like at all. So I don't know if he really cares that much about those experiments.
Well, I don't know. Like, I feel like Sam Harris is so. Maybe I've got this wrong, but I just feel like he's so like literally materialistic. Like he believes in spirituality and things like that, but as far as anything that is of that nature, I'm not so sure because he really uses scientific references and like appeals to I would say material logic in order to uphold his argument. Like I said in his book, like the example that he had used. I don't know if you guys read his book on free will?
not yet.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've heard him talk about it a lot. I read sections of it, like based on what was uploaded online, but I haven't read the full book. Are you
Okay.
talking
It's a small book, so even the stuff online probably covers most of it.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Because the book is only like 70 pages or something like that. It's
Okay.
not very long. But essentially, so he uses the an example of these two men that break into this family's house. They beat the husband unconscious, and then they like rape the wife, and then they tie the daughter to the bed. And then I think or one of the guys rapes the wife, and then he kills her. And they thought they killed the husband, but they didn't. And they did tie the daughter to the bed. They lit the house on fire, and then they left. The only person that escaped was the husband. And Sam Harris was talking about how immoral we would think that situation is. I guess in a regular context, like the difference between how moral we would think it would be in a regular context versus if these people had some sort of brain tumor. That made it to where, I don't know if you guys heard about the guy who sniped people from somewhere and he had like a brain tumor going on.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I heard. He was at a college campus.
Right. Yeah, and they figured out he had a brain tumor. Yeah, and then they said, like, I guess after it was removed, he essentially was just like, oh my god, I can't believe what I've done, all that business. And so he was like,
killed.
Yeah, or wait, he was killed?
Yeah, he was shot. It was the only way to get him down.
He left a note for them to do an autopsy on his brain, and they found the brain tumor.
Okay, yeah, I guess I got that mixed up a little bit, but yeah, okay, so there's that, and then he was Sam's case was that okay. So how are we? If we take into consideration the brain tumor thing, if you really think about it, how much different is that versus the way in which their brain chemistry was acting in that particular time, in that particular situation? That's like the basis for his argument in his book on a scientific level. He says, well, what if someone's chemistry is just made that way, wherein they essentially think the same way that the person or think and act the same way that the person with the brain tumor thinks and acts? How would we look at them at that point? All their genotypical predispositions combined with their sociocultural upbringing has led to this particular moment and these reactions and these actions. So how are we going to look at that differently from somebody who has a brain tumor that has already kind of this sort of stuff?
So
that was his case.
So the way I would phrase the question is, does everybody agree that, let's say, physical conditions, whether it be your environment or your body, does affect your mental state?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree on that.
Yeah, but not in the same way for every person.
Physical.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah, for sure.
Physical conditions that affect your
mental state.
Yeah. What about it?
From the baseline, definitely. If you change someone's health, their thoughts will change.
Yeah.
But it's impossible. It's impossible to test because two people's baselines are different. And if you give one person a tumor, they'll kill themselves before they'll kill other people. But you give another person the same brain tumor, they'll kill other people before they kill themselves. So, yeah, from the baseline, yeah, if there's a change in your health or situation, you'll see a difference. But if it's impossible to denote this kind of brain tumor makes you homicidal or not.
Well, my question would be, to what degree does our brain chemistry and our genes or our compulsions, to what degree do our compulsions control our behavior? So that, I guess that would be my question.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are disorders like obsessive compulsive disorder where you oh, sorry, did I cut you off, Rebecca?
No.
No, that was funny. It looked like you were gonna say something, but then you just sat there.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
I mean, yeah, it's a hard question, I think, and
it is.
You say compulsion. Are you equating compulsion with like kind of
your inner compulsions or impulses? I mean,
like whether or not that dictates how we behave, like our actions.
To what degree do our inner compulsions, so you feel compelled to do something, I guess, by say how you feel, right? To what degree does that control our actual behavior?
I think that's a rather strange question, like, because I mean it does.
Yeah, there are varying degrees, because like if you're hungry and there's food in front of you, you are going to eat it. You're not gonna like starve or myself.
And even when you're not hungry, but like, goddamn, that cake looks really good. So you have
Right.
some
So,
cake.
to what degree are you like? Does that compulsion toward the cake make you eat it? That's
I
that's
think
what my
it
depends on the
kind
factors.
of how, like, your like I feel like we always have these like unconscious drivers, like regardless, like, you know, like going through us all the time, that will make us develop like these habits, and like, you know, we'll just do things automatically without even thinking about it. Like, especially if our body is telling us one thing, we'll like act on it. But like the conscious part kicks in when you're not in like a deprived state, like it's not like an urgent need of your body, then, or like you have also faced to like social conditioning of that action, like the negative consequences of that social conditioning of committing that action. So then you also, that's when the conscious part kicks in.
and so I would say that would be a case for vetoing an impulsive behavior, right? Wouldn't that be because you're feeling impulsive to eat the particular thing that's in front of you, say cake, but say that
Yeah.
you're on a diet, right?
Are you Andrew? When are you emphasizing impulses because you think that the impulses are kind of like more directly linked to our like what's going on like neurochemically, and you know, in terms of our hormones? So we have like sexual impulses, and that's because of various kinds of hormones that are directly influencing how we think and feel and behave. Is that why you're emphasizing like impulses?
I'm emphasizing impulses because the case for determinism seems to be that we're controlled by, you know, our genotypical predispositions as with a combination of sociocultural kind of upbringings. So he talks about how you're influenced and swayed into making decisions. You don't actually make the decisions for yourself. You're swayed by, you know, whatever your brain chemistry is at that particular point in time, and the reason it's that particular way is because of a domino effect. Sort of, this thing happened in the past, this thing, you know, you had a warm cup of coffee instead of a cold, and what have you. And
yeah,
so
no,
all of these factors.
I totally agree with that though. Like I think like everything we decide in life is based on it's always a combination of like what our body is telling us, and then how like the knowledge and like experiences we've collected over time.
Well, I think that I would kind of agree with that, but again, like the case for determinism would be that you're not making these decisions at all. Like it's just a consequence of your brain chemistry at the time, along with whatever environmental factors are around. So are we able to kind of step outside of those particular things? Like if you're mad and you're about to do something. So another case for determinism is to say that if you've done something in the past, you couldn't have done anything differently. If you replayed that over and over and over again. So when you say like, oh, I went to the ice cream store and I chose chocolate, but I could have chose vanilla. Sam Harris's case is that you could not have chosen vanilla if you replayed that over and over and over again. That you couldn't have even chosen it.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
just to
ahead,
be
Frank.
clear, with determinism, so make sure we're using the same language. With determinism, that seems to imply a lack of free will, that you don't make any
Exactly.
choices because
Yeah.
it's like a domino effect.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, well, like determinism, if I understand it as well, it's not just restricted to people and the way, it's the whole universe. It's like, well, there is this kind of chain of causation that is just constantly playing out, and
Exactly.
it's governed by the laws of nature. And
I
then
totally agree.
Right, and we're not independent of that.
Spinning around the sun, like it doesn't have a choice, like it just does.
Yeah.
The other side to that is the world, the universe, and everything is too complex in a way to be determined already. Because if you look at, for example, even Sam Harris's example of the spin of quarks, there's actually no rule based on all the information that you know about that quark, which way its spin is going to be.
Yeah, but that's a difference now between prediction and determinism.
Yeah,
Like we can't predict what the behavior of certain.
maybe the predictive factors were actually in the future.
No, but yeah, and like the point is that according to determinism, the behavior of a system is determined regardless of whether or not we could ever actually predict it.
Yeah,
You know, so we can't predict the behavior of water that splashes off of a flat surface because of like chaos theory and the fact that you'd have to know initial conditions to like an infinitely precise degree. So the point is like we can't predict any of that. But determinists would still say it's still determined. We're just not able to, like,
the things that would the predictive measures of that are actually in the future.
I don't know much about quantum physics, so maybe.
But the one thing Sam Harris said in that podcast that really stuck in my head and had a thought that made me think was to have if you consciously wanted to have a thought, you'd already have to have had the thought. So like to go and read a book off my bookshelf, I've got a bookshelf and I already have a certain number of books. The reason why I can say I'm going to pick that book, Jordan Peterson, and I'm going to read that book is because it's already on my bookshelf. Whereas the thoughts in our head don't really come to us that way. They're memories. Whereas a thought or an impulse in a particular situation comes to us. It's not like a book on a bookshelf.
Yep. And in my case, like against that would be the way that we operate is we don't just have a bunch of random clouds of thought just pop up in our heads like out of nowhere all day long. I mean, if you're driving on the road and you drive past, so there's an environment that is in front of us, and then we kind of react and act toward that environment. So if you drive past like a McDonald's, a thought comes into your head relative to that McDonald's right there and says, oh, I'm kind of hungry. And then what that does is I would say that activates kind of like a string, like a cluster of neurons within your brain that says, okay, I'm hungry, food. And then under that, what can I eat?
Yeah. I mean, I think his point is not that. Like, obviously, we react to our environment and situations that will make us think certain ways. But I think his point is more just that we're not in control of that whole process.
Yeah. I understand that.
It's really that is his thing. It's like, look, doesn't matter if this is determined by the laws of physics or if it's determined by some invisible world of Teletubbies. The point is that we can't control it.
So that would be to say like the entire universe is determined, and we're actually not independent of that process by any means.
Yeah. I mean, like,
I disagree with that completely. I think we're completely different from any other organism that we know of in the universe. I think that we actually stop that sort of process.
And just curious, who here does agree with Sam that we're completely we just don't have the free will? Just curious, does anyone agree with that thought process?
No.
I mean, I feel like his definition isn't very helpful. Like, it always confuses people. But I still agree with most of what he says.
Yeah, I think that in the way he talks about it, it's like, yeah, okay. So when that thought, like, I want some tea instead of coffee, comes in my head, it's like, okay, do I know exactly where that thought came from? No.
Exactly.
Like, was I like when he says, if you rewound the clock, like, could you have chosen coffee instead of tea? Like, in my head, the answer is you might have, but you would be in no more quote unquote control over that decision as you would have been on the original one. It's like either one could have happened. Your mind could have produced either of those thoughts, but like, would this experience? Because this is the thing. Sam's argument is I know he throws in the stuff about the experiments, and he's a science. He's big on science, so he likes to talk about determinism and laws of physics and stuff like that. But his main argument comes from his meditative experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
His argument comes from the fact that when you meditate and you go looking for this thinker of thoughts that supposedly has this will, when you go looking for it, it's not there in conscious experience. It just disappears. So this is like, if you haven't meditated yourself, but you might have heard people who talk about mindfulness and meditation, you might have heard them say something about how the self is an illusion, the self disappears. Like that's what Sam is talking about. He's like, when you meditate and you quote unquote observe conscious experience, what you actually observe is thoughts just arise in your head of their own accord. Like it's there is no central node, no thinker that's
And
walking
that's
around in
like,
there.
yeah, and that like I think it's because like I've used his app and like I've meditated before, like following his stuff, but I've also used his app and like all the like lessons and stuff he provides there, and like when after using all that stuff, I'm like, okay, this guy makes a million times more sense now when I go back and actually like listen to what he's writing and saying, and like now I get why everyone's confused. But yeah, like if you were to actually like follow his content there on waking up, then he makes a million times more sense.
His whole worldview in a lot of ways comes from his meditative stuff. Like
Exactly.
the
and
thing about it is,
with.
sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
And I was just gonna say like there, like it makes total sense what he's saying. Like it's just not helpful to the average person, like saying that like free will is an illusion, because we still do make decisions and actions and like have thought processes. It's just that we're not like and like we have this illusion of being in control, which is like good, I guess. But it's still an illusion at the end of the day.
Well, like sorry, I'll just say one thing and then I'll shut up. Is like my big problem with his whole thing is that I think now he might say this is just a language thing. I'm not sure. Like I think it's incoherent from his worldview to even say you have no free will, because at the level of experience that he has to go down to make free will disappear, that notion of you disappears as well. Like he's like, if you pay attention to your inner mind and you see thoughts appearing and there's no control, like at that level of experience there's no you either, so it's I'm not sure what he's on about. It's like, okay, fine, I can make my conscious experience play out in such a way where my sense of myself disappears. I can do that. I can meditate and I can make my mind do that.
That's what I meant. Like it's not helpful, because I feel like you can, like in terms of meditation, you can get to that point, but at the end of the day, once you stop meditating, you still come back, like you're still in your body, and like you have a role and whatnot.
So just curious to make sure I'm following. When Danny, like your line of dialogue, when you say that there's no longer a you, is it because the you is just the cluster of cells and
no? It's like it's more like, so when we're like you and I and the five of us right now, when we're sitting here talking to each other, we have an actual experience. Like if I said, well, what exactly are you? Where are you right now? You would say, well, I'm in my head. I have a sense of me, whatever that means, in my head. Like you don't feel like you're in your hand, or in your leg. You feel like you're in your head, right? And that feeling of a you that's floating around up there, and that you is the
like,
thing. Is the thinker of your thoughts, is the author of your thoughts. So when you choose an ice cream and an ice cream flavor, there is that experience that there is a you doing the choosing. It's actually a part of your experience when you're walking around. When you meditate, you can make that feeling go away.
And he was talking about how it's just like an appearance in consciousness.
Yeah,
But,
like
you
it's
know,
it's,
when
it's a
you
bit hard to describe if you haven't done it. It's very uncomfortable.
exactly.
Like a meta self.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's more just like you kind of just notice that everything that okay, if I try and maybe talk about it, I help me when if you try and explain what's happening physically, right, at any moment. So when you see stuff, what's actually happening physically is light is hitting particular photoreceptive cells in the back of your eye. That generates certain electrical signals that travels up the optic nerve, and then that does something with various neural pathways in your brain. But what's happening physically is just pulses of electricity. And then those pulses of electricity somehow get rendered by your mind into a visual image, right?
Mhm.
So everything that you see, everything that you hear, everything that you feel like when you're touching something, all of it really is just a rendering that's happening in your brain. And so this feeling where your hand is like there, but you're here, and there's like a distance between like you and your hand, that's all being rendered as well in your brain. That's not actually real. That there's nothing real about
Yes, the electrical pulses.
it. Yeah. And
It's
so
almost kind of like he believes in dualism sometimes, that like the mind and body are separate, and like, you know, the like people just get to experience the mind or this consciousness through all these bodies, but we're actually not like our own individual. We're just, it's all like just one collective, and like each person is getting to experience that through
I,
separate bodies.
I think you're right, Rebecca. I think that the way he seems to think this, I think this is a mistake. I think he thinks that when you meditate, you
Mhm.
can peel away some of these illusionary layers, you know, so you
Mhm.
can like that feeling of your hand being here and you being here. When you
Yeah.
meditate, you can make that feeling like go away, and you can actually feel that feeling when I wave my hand and I can feel some air like kind of rushing over my hand. When you meditate, you can actually make it feel like that is happening in your head, not out here on your hand. And I think Sam interprets that as kind of peeling away some of the illusions and kind of having more direct contact,
That's
raw
that's
experience.
that's really interesting because so you said that when you're meditating, you can make it to where you feel as if you're waving your hand in the air, even if you're not, right? That's what you
Uh,
just said,
or, or well, like okay, you wouldn't be waving your hand around when you're meditating. So
right? But
maybe
you
like
can,
the cushion that's underneath you that you're sitting on, that
Yeah.
feeling of the back of your legs on the cushion, you can feel the pressure. Like
mm,
so, when you're meditating, that feeling, you can make it move up into your
okay,
head.
okay. So the reason that's interesting to me is because, and I know I keep kind of going back to the Lebet experiments because I'm really materialistic and I have a really high appreciation for like neuroscience and things like that because I don't know, they just seem to reveal a truth that I don't think we've seen in any other sort of study. So in when they were trying to replicate the Lebet experiments, they told people to just kind of think about instead of hitting the left or the right button, they just said, okay, think about it and imagine yourself hitting one of these buttons. And what had happened is the neural activity in the brain was actually replicated of those people who had actually hit the buttons versus people who just imagined hitting the buttons. All of that neural activity was like replicated. So I think that's why it's super interesting that we can kind of use our imaginations and the same stuff happens in our brains. Um,
Yeah,
Well,
that's
yeah, yeah.
so,
I just think that's really cool. But I had a couple points. I don't know if you had anything to say, George.
yeah. I was just going to say that's also where things like empathy would come from, because when we see someone get hurt, we can recreate that in our brain and go, "Oh, that would hurt," and we, in a way, we feel their pain. So that's very much where your empathy would come from.
And that's actually part of the reason as to why I would say um, we're kind of separated from the deterministic reality of everything else, because everything else seems to be upholding a state of homeostasis, at all times. I mean, if you think about animals in the wild and everything like that, what are they doing and why are they doing it? Survival, all the time, right? They don't have the capabilities of us to commit evil and good acts to the extent that we can commit those acts, right? We can deliberately do these things with a sort of malicious intention because we know what hurts. We know what hurts and we know how to inflict that upon other people. We also know how to inflict good upon other people and the world, right? And we can do it with that intention. So I think that is one of the biggest things that separates us from the rest of the deterministic reality around us. Like, we're not just constantly upholding homeostasis to whatever degree. Like, we're doing it to a minimal degree, right? We have to eat, we have to sleep, we have to do all that business, but we live with a purpose outside of literally everything else that we've ever observed.
For me, so this conversation about like the determinism and stuff like that, it's just a separate conversation to a notion of, okay, does somebody have control over the next thought that pops in their head? But the determinism stuff doesn't work for me because it doesn't okay, we live in a deterministic universe in the sense that, the broadest sense, in that every effect has a cause, like that happened before it. It's like, that's fine, but that's a pretty empty statement, you know. The problem for me is that like genuinely new things emerge over time in the universe, new abstract things in particular, and those abstract things have new causal effects on what already existed, and those abstract things and their effects were not determined before those abstract things existed. World War II could not have happened only for the fact that the abstraction of a country existed, but countries didn't exist 7 billion years ago. You know, the planet Earth didn't exist 7 billion years ago. So whatever chain of causation was underway 7 billion years ago in this pocket of the galaxy, it's a new chain of causation that's there now, because since then, these new abstract things like countries, among a million other things, have been created, and those abstract things have real causal effects on physical objects. And so, like, this is what I mean when I say, like, this notion of appealing to stuff like physics and appealing to physical things and going, well, you know, that's all determined by the laws of physics, therefore we don't have free will. It just doesn't work for me.
So you don't agree with, like, I would say half of his argument. You believe in like a sort of causal universe, right? Kind of like karma, but maybe without the reality part, or I mean the morality part, right? Like,
it's not karma.
Around.
No, like, I mean,
that's what karma would be, is that, you know, what you did in your past life affects what the state that you're in now.
Okay, yeah, in a very broad sense, yeah, but nothing,
not
crucial,
literally
spiritual. Yeah, like, I'm not implying anything spiritual here.
Right. No, I understand, but
so wait, I kind of got lost. So Danny, so you're not on board with cause and effect?
I am on board with cause and effect, but I'm not on board with the idea that it's only physical. I'm not on board with the idea that it's only physical things that have causal effects on other physical things.
Okay.
And like, so, and the reason for that is, and this is what, or sorry, now from denying that doesn't immediately deny determinism or anything like that. It just says, well, if non-physical things can have causal effect on the physical things, well, then all I need to kind of get rid of determinism is to say, well, do new non-physical things come into existence over time? And if the answer to that is yes, then this notion that what happens to physical objects over time is determined only by physics is wrong.
So what else would it be determined by if it's not
I
by
feel like,
determined by
yeah.
physical things?
I
Like,
mean,
what is non-physical?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I feel like I kind of still more agree with Sam, and I think that there is a lot, like there are other like laws that we can't perceive, like the laws of the non-physical
Yeah.
dimensions, and like those laws also govern us, but since we can't account them.
Well, we
And
already have like one big one. We've already discovered one massive one that
Which
isn't
is
like, which
with,
is like the law of the evolution, like of Darwinism. Like that's not,
yeah,
that Darwinism is not about physical objects. You know,
yeah,
now everything that Darwinism does is instantiated in physical objects, but Darwinism is about like replicators and about abstract things like replicators, variation, selection.
So you believe in evolution, right?
Yes, obviously, but the
But
point is that
it's not
the
limited
theory of evolution
to
is not a,
matter. It can be applied to abstract ideas.
Oh no,
as well.
it can't. But
So-
I feel like there is something for that too, like abstractions. It's just something that's not perceivable by us.
What I
Next evolutionary step of humans can perceive it. I don't know, but
well, we can perceive the laws of physics, right? Even the laws of physics
Yeah.
themselves. Oh no, that was a mirror that just fell over in my room.
oh no.
Yeah,
Talking
It was
about
determined, man. You need to stop talking about it.
the laws of physics themselves don't exist physically, right?
Yeah, they are themselves
Yeah.
abstractions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like gravity, we know the acceleration on Earth toward the surface is 9.81 meters per second, but there's no physical thing that says 9.81 meters per second down, right?
The conservation of energy principle does not exist physically, and yet we can perceive it and we can understand it. The whole of mathematics is all about abstractions, and yet we perceive and understand that stuff.
So
So what? Yeah.
what relation does that?
So I think like one example is, let's say, broadly speaking, religions, right? Because we start to play with semantics, and I don't have the definition on me, but let's say Darwinism is applied to creatures or animals. In its original definition, it wasn't applied to ideas. But I think you can take its general concept and apply it to ideas. For example, if you look at different religions, they're, again, broadly speaking, ideas of how to live. And you can see which religions or which ideas play out the best, just like creatures. And you can apply the core concept of Darwinism that was meant for creatures, and you can apply it to these ideas and see which ones
Well, like religions
work
are
the best.
memes.
Yeah.
Like religious ideas are memes, and memes replicate and vary between people in the same way that genes replicate and vary like between like subsequent generations of organisms. Like so, like religions are the product of evolution, but just not genetic evolution. They're the product of like mimetic evolution. This was Dawkins' amazing discovery in his book, The Selfish Gene. Now he himself probably didn't take it as seriously as he should have, but like Darwinism as we understand it perfectly applies to religions.
So I have like a contention with Sam Harris essentially saying that like he's attributing the unknown to determinism when he says, well, you don't know where those thoughts came from. It's like, yeah, we don't know. So that's what it is. It's unknown. But he's attributing the fact that we don't know where the thoughts came from to a known cause, which is unfalsifiable. Right? You can't prove that. It's like, okay, so prove it to me then. And to what degree? To what degree do these particular causal kind of effects lead to my thoughts, my mental state, and then my action outside? To what degree does that happen? Is it all the way? And then how do you prove it to me?
I think if I
Just
can
an
play devil's,
unfalsifiable idea. Because
if I can play devil's advocate there, I think all he would say is that he doesn't need to know where it came from. All he needs to know is if you were in control of it. And if you're not in control of it, then peep the
it'd
end.
be
Then the
unknown.
notion of free will is not there.
But
Yeah.
but then it would be unknown, and then he would make the attribution to determinism. That's just like saying, "Well, God made me do it." So you don't know, so God made me do it. Well, I can't you can't disprove that, and you can't point to the kind of sequence of events, prior events that made this thought come up in my head. So God put it there. It's just like religious people attribute the unknown to the supernatural. It's the same exact thing. You can't prove it. You can't unprove it. Right? It's unfalsifiable.
Well, you see, he's not attributing.
He's not attributing it to God. He's not saying like.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying he's attributing the unknown to the known. He's saying he knows
he's not
what the cause of the
to a known. He's not saying he knows what the cause is. He's just saying that it's an unknown. Like he's just figuring that out.
Yeah, he's saying you're not in control of it.
Yeah, the free will argument, like that he is arguing against, is that you are in control of that thought. You're the author of it. So he's saying people pretend like they know where their thoughts came from. They came from themselves. And he's just saying, well, when you go looking, you can see that they didn't come from themselves. We don't know where it came from exactly.
I disagree. I'd argue against that because what is it to think? Like so I thought about yesterday what the neurophysiological process is by which we actually think. And what is that activated by? It's like, so when you're thinking about something, so say the movie example, right? So what do? Is we rely on our previous experiences in order to deliberately reach into our minds from the hippocampus and other parts of experiential parts of our brains, bring forth these memories. And then we have a selection of these things that were in our prior experiences. We deliberately do all of this, right? And this has been shown in those experiments that were trying to kind of replicate Lebet's results. And so I would say that it's not just, we don't know. These things come from our previous experiences, again. And we deliberately called them forward in order to weigh them, I would say, and then make a conscious decision. I mean, that's how you change your behavior, right? You recognize some sort of toxic bad behavior. You say, okay, I have this behavior. Apparently it's some sort of compulsion inside me. Maybe it's reflexive or something. You recognize it. And then it's like, well, how do you change that? Right? In the world of determinism, if everything's just kind of already determined and we don't really make choices, I don't see how we change that particular thing deliberately. You're not even responsible for anything in that world. So I would say we can.
What do you think about this? And would this be like another fair question? It's like the other side of the coin. When Sam, here would be my question. When Sam says, "That's not you thinking," what does he mean by "that's not you"?
I think that the image that I get whenever he says that's not you thinking is that just random thought bubbles coming from like nothing are coming into your head. But I would argue that they are coming from something. They're coming from your previous experiences into the world. Previous experiences in the world, and you're bringing them forth in order to deliberate upon different choices that you could make in a given situation. That's what I would say. But
so where did all of the thoughts that you just used to say that, where did they come from?
Experience and prior knowledge.
No, but what I'm saying is if you pay attention to what's happening in your mind in that moment. So like as I'm talking, right? And a thought, so as I'm speaking, a thought just came into your head, right? About what you want to say next. Where did it come from?
Well, neurophysiologically, it would be me deliberately reaching into my brain with my consciousness, activating like some subset cluster of neurons that have prior knowledge in order to, translate what you're saying and get activate different relational clusters of neurons. That's what I would say. And as far as the consciousness goes, it's like we don't know what consciousness is.
Yeah.
There's no falsifiable properties regarding consciousness, but it seems to be able to activate deliberate behaviors.
Right, but were you, even if we take for argument's sake your description of what was happening there, and we say that that was right, that's what actually was happening, were you in control of any of that?
I would argue, and this is also proven by the experiments, the other kind of Lebesgue replication experience. Yes, because when they studied people thinking in their minds, these people were deliberately activating neurons within their brain. That's how they thought. That's how they
they weren't activating neurons. They were just thinking stuff, and then the neurons started lighting up. But
they were
people weren't
reaching in their
but
brain.
People were not like your experience of using your neurons is not the same as your experience of using your hand. Like when I reach out and I grab this watch, right? I have an experience of I am in control of my hand, that I am going to take my arm and I'm going to extend my elbow, I'm going to clasp the watch and bring it back. You do not have an experience like that with your neurons. Like,
what does that? I would say that it doesn't have to be like that. Even if you don't say experience it, it's still shown physically. Like it's shown physically that these particular parts of your brain light up when you're retrieving memories, and you're deliberately saying, hey, remember this, and then you're deliberately saying, okay, let me try to remember that. And that's actually what's happening by controlling your deliberate thoughts. You are actually reaching for clusters of neurons that contain these particular memories that somebody's asking for you to recall.
I think as far as what you're saying, I think I agree with like a lot of it, in the sense that obviously your thoughts, whatever they are, whether it's an image or a word or a feeling or an emotion or an impulse, etc., they all that's all happening in your mind, in your consciousness. And obviously all of that corresponds to something physical. Like there is something happening in your brain in that moment physically. But the relevant part of this, the relevant part to Sam's argument about free will, is people walk around with an experience like they are in control of where that next thought comes from. But in the same way that I have an experience of being in control over my hand when I'm clasping this watch. And Sam's argument is that when you pay attention to what is actually happening in your conscious mind, right, in that moment, you do, like, all that's happening is the thoughts are just arising, and you didn't choose the next thought. So just slow down 1 second, and the next thought that's popping into your head as I'm talking, ask yourself, like, where did that thought come from? And I don't mean physically. I mean, like, in your mind, were you aware of that thought arriving from somewhere or something like that? As in, so if the next thought that came into your head was, man, I fucking really disagree with everything Danny just said, I cannot believe he just said something so stupid. Like, I'm not saying that's what you actually are thinking, but if it was, like, where did it come from? Do you know, like, were you in control of it? Were you in charge of it? That's Sam's point. Sam isn't denying that all of this stuff corresponds to something physically happening in the brain.
Yeah, see, where I run off the rails with determinism here is we have a lot more than just the thought that we end up saying. We have a lot of thoughts, and I think of me as my whole brain, not a little meta brain, little fella running around different sections flipping switches. So yeah, I have an impulse that says that was stupid, and I have another impulse that says I get it. Now that I have all these different impulses at the same time, but my consciousness is that exchange of information around my brain. So and the pathways it takes, right? You know, you got your Broca's region here, which controls speech. Well, that's the last thing it gets to. It has all these other thoughts: impulse control, anger control, all these emotional controls. All the emotions go off at the same time, and they filter through their controls, and then I form a sentence to say. So my thinking, my difficulty with Sam Harris's determinism is, I completely agree. You don't decide where you come from, where your family were, who your family are. You don't decide how you got to a situation in life, but the lens that you see the world through and act through is your personality.
Mhm.
And some people don't have as much impulse control. They're impulsive. Some people don't have as much anger control. They're angry. Some people are more open, so they see the connections. There's more connections to them in the world than people who are very, very low in openness. So where I come off the rails with determinism is, yeah, we all have all of these thoughts, but we organize them, filter them, and form and we create a behavior. And the thing is throughout your life, you create behavior when you're young that doesn't really work very well, and you hone in on a behavior that works. And there's more than one way of being productive. You can be conscientious and work as an accountant, or you can be very open and be an inventor. You can be an artist or a plumber, right? There's all these different ways, and sometimes a bit of being a plumber is useful. Sometimes being an accountant is useful, or whatever, engineer. What we do is we hone in on successful paths of being. So we're not bound to make the same mistakes as we always do. We do reflect on our past. We do learn. And for me, that says that determinism can't be real, because it can't be true in the truest sense. I mean, you're determined where you were born. You were determined.
Yeah, like for that part, I feel like the laws of evolution or whatever help explain that part better, because I mean there's the laws of physics, but then evolution, like everything is always increasing towards a state of disorder. Everything is random and unpredictable. So like you're born in like you're just one biological entity, but how you react to different environments will depend on how that like environment is evolving. So and that gives us that whole illusion of choice, because there are so many different variations and possibilities of how we can act in a given.
Having listened to Sam Harris, I do think that there is a bit of an illusion of choice, that people think there's this much choice in their life when there's really this much. But the thing is for me is like we can make changes, we can learn things, we can make a difference, and in ways that we couldn't have imagined. That's the weird thing, like unintended consequences, right? Sometimes we can do things we can't even imagine today, right? For example, I live in a country that I never thought of moving to before I came here.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel like that's all thanks to evolution of the world constantly moving towards like the state of evolving.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more just like, because I think I agree with you, George, but the way I would just put it is just that when people have some kind of a problem, their mind just starts to create new ideas, and those new ideas that their mind creates have very, very real new causal effects on that person and the stuff around them. So like you say, that is what learning really is. It's when you have new ideas at your disposal to do new things that you couldn't do before. And it's like, so in that sense, determinism is wrong. Like, and I agree with all that, but this is what I mean. This is what I mean when I say free will. So the question of, am I choosing the next thought? Did I author that next thought that popped up in my head is a completely different question to whether or not, oh shit, my battery's going to die in 2 seconds. And I have to go and now anyway, so I'll just.
Damn. What a cliffhanger.
Yeah, sorry. I'll just say that's what I mean when I say they're different. So you can dismiss determinism, and I think Sam could still make the case, even after everything you just said, George, that you did not author any of that argument. Do you know?
Yeah, what I was saying is that we have more than one thought, and we we filter out. So it's not just like one thought, this is what happens. It's like we have all of these competing thoughts, and then we end up choosing a path. And that choice, there are different things you can do. Whereas, and there's realistically, a lot of people, a lot of time, don't know what to do. You just guess and flip a coin, guess sometimes. So I don't think our behavior is determined. For example, you can there's like that Boeing 777 that blew up an engine, right? Have a good one, mate. That Boeing 777 that blew up an engine. Now that was determined that was going to happen because there was cracks in a fan blade, and then the forces through it blew up, right? That's the physical. That's determined. Lost an engine. Now, how the pilots reacted to that isn't determined. They could have panicked, like some crews have done in the past. There was a Chinese airliner that went down because they blew up an engine and shut down the engine that was good, right? There was, they went through, they were given a situation that was determined. They went through their checklist and they did all the right things to get the best result. And they got the best result. They landed safely.
So, George,
But
so what you're saying is like, yeah, in actuality, we have a limited set of options. And what you're saying is that because from those limited set of options, we then choose which option we want to proceed with.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of factors pushing us towards certain options. For example, there was a Chinese airliner that crashed. The left-hand engine quit, but because in training it was always the right-hand engine that they practiced with it quitting, they shut down the wrong engine. So they ended up with no working engines on the airplane. Now, there's a lot of factors that went into making that mistake, but they ultimately made that mistake. Whereas the Boeing 777 crew, they were given a situation and right, what's wrong? Right-hand engine on fire. We need to shut the right-hand engine down, secure the engine, and then get back to the airport. So they made the right decisions, even though there were two options available: make the right decision or many, many wrong decisions. But determinism gave them a situation where their aircraft had failed them, and their limited free will, limited options that they had were their operating window, and they made the right decisions in that operating window to land safely.
So that would be an argument for compatibilism. Compatibilism is wherein free will is actually compatible with determinism. That's what that would be. So
I would say, I absolutely agree.
So what I would say happens is, you're not responsible for the first particular thing that happens in your brain when you're reacting to something. So if you're walking down the street and say, I don't know, you see something, you're not responsible for what pops up in your head. But what I would say is that, like, the particular environment that has been presented to you gives you a reactive thought. And then from there, if you are consciously, deliberately thinking, you start to grab those thoughts yourself. You start to author those thoughts after you've reacted to the environment that is in front of you. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say, is that it kind of gets a thought train going, and then you figure out which direction to kind of go with. If you're trying to remember something, if you're trying to say something or do something, I would say that you're doing that.
I would say, I would still say that those decisions and stuff, it's still governed by evolution and our need to survive, to evolve our need, and those decisions at the end of the day, even if it doesn't look like it's a survival decision, it still kind of is, or your need to evolve and replicate and spread your information. I
would say to a degree. I wouldn't say that it completely governs your behavior. And I don't know if you guys watched the podcast with Brett Weinstein and Jordan Peterson. Any of you guys see that?
Was that with
Not
Rogan?
yet.
Was
It was
that a few
super-
years ago? Or?
No, it was super recent. It was
Super
like a couple
recent.
days ago. It was so
Oh,
awesome.
okay.
But they were actually
Alright.
talking about this. Brett Weinstein actually made a case against that. He said that, what we do is we put those desires to, I guess, uphold homeostasis in a special place, right? But as far as human beings go, we have a plethora of other things to be doing. So we give special place to furthering your genes and eating and surviving and all that stuff. But we have so many other things that we can and we do do.
Yeah, I mean, like part of that whole like evolution theory, though, it's not just about like biologically surviving. It's also about like improving your genetics. It's also about exploring and seeing how far your mind can go, and that's where that whole curiosity part comes from. And we make decisions based on that, like curiosity, which is also part of like tied into that whole like evolution theory.
I think that it's influenced, but it's I would agree with Brett saying that these certain particular actions are separate to a pretty high degree. When we get to like the more abstract things that humans do, I'm not so sure that all of them are evolutionarily advantageous.
They might not be, but it's like humans figuring things out through trial and error. Like they're constantly looking to evolve. Like
well,
the ones
even
that do, like the ones that have advantages are the ones that like replicate. The ones that don't
Die off.
I would say like we commit acts that are not, we know that are not advantageous to us and everything. I don't know. I just think that everything is so much more complex in the world that we've created so far.
Yeah,
It's
and
far
I feel
too
like every
complex.
time you add like this layer, like a new dimension to like some kind of biological entity, it complicates that whole evolution process. But it's still, I feel like, governed by evolution. Like
What
even the way we think and how we process things and act, I
I-
feel
yeah.
that our need to explore and
I'm sorry, Mike. I keep interrupting you. I'm just like,
No,
trying to
go
think
ahead.
in my head. I'm so sorry. I think my argument would just be that like consciousness, like our very consciousness, that does separate us biologically from everything else in the universe. I don't really know what to make of that because it just makes it to where we just think, I don't know, we do things that no other organisms can do or have done, like the behaviors that we exhibit.
Partly down to our dexterity too.
Right? Like, I don't know. Like, I really agree with the argument that, essentially everything is just kind of keeping with a path of homeostasis and evolution. But as far as humans go, because of consciousness and the abstract things that come from that, I would disagree that we're doing that all of the time, that everything that we're doing is kind of evolutionarily charged and biologically charged.
Well, what about this? Would you say that prior to humans, consciousness didn't exist?
See, and as far as consciousness goes, it's like, oh man, to what degree, what do we consider consciousness? Is just awareness consciousness? Like, and how much does consciousness branch out? I don't know how I could answer that. I've not thought about that question.
So, like for me, like I see these two things coexisting, and consciousness, if you want to say like intelligence, like dog, then gorilla, then human. That's
consciousness, intelligence, or like the universe.
Yeah.
We know
there's
we know
parallels
that,
with that, but the way I see it is like we have. It's the same way with like Jordan. There's like the chaos and the order. There's the order is like the default, your tradition, your culture, your genetics, and I see that as our biological tendencies / predispositions / all the evolutionary aspects, and that's part of us, and that plays out. To me, it's like two rows of dominoes. So you have that row of dominoes coming in, but then your consciousness affects that on top of it. And I think it's one way to perceive this is that as we get older, we become more competent from like a baby to a kid to an adult. We become more conscious and we become more self-aware. And then we can override those biological tendencies.
Yeah, that would be also a case for compatibilism. So, I mean, it seems like George and Frank kind of read with what would be compatibilism, but I would say that, Rebecca, you would say that these conscious decisions, do they stem from, again, kind of the evolutionary and biological factors?
I would say so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. See, that's what I kind of thought. Yeah. So it seems like you're a pretty hard determinist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
Like maybe because I'm a science major too. I don't know what, but also yeah. Like when everything made sense to me. I know it's not a helpful way to frame things though. Like especially because even though like we have this illusion of choice, it's still a real to us. So it's not always helpful to like say that to someone because we still make choices.
Or we still make the illusion of choices.
Yeah, like we still make
See, I don't like that. I don't like that.
So would this be a proper parallel? It's like telling a puppet, "Hey man, this guy's gonna move your strings that way," and you're just like, "Okay, fuck." And so it's like there's no point in telling the puppet what's gonna go down.
I guess
I would say that's
yeah.
the argument for determinism. Yeah, and yeah, I don't know. And I would keep arguing to the ends of the earth with you, Rebecca, on that one. Jordan said something interesting a while ago about that. He said that in kind of, I guess, his theory that he's brought forward regarding selection is that consciousness kind of emerged and it was sexually selected for. And then through consciousness, we start to change the path of evolution. So we start to actually author what is selected for deliberately.
Yes.
That's what he's said.
Yeah, and that's actually what I was going to say as well. Is that you have like the biological aspect and the conscious aspect, but I think it's like a feedback. They feed into each other, and it's actually kind of like a continuum.
He was making that case with Brett too.
So another like argument that people have against Sam, like have you heard of what's his name, the philosopher something Hume, who talks about the is-ought principle?
Yeah, David Hume.
Yeah. So and they're like, well, that means Sam probably thinks that like, oh, because something is a certain way, that means it ought to be that way. But I don't think that's what Sam's saying at all. Like because yeah, like you said, we still choose which outcomes we want for like a better world or whatever. Like we do that whole selection process, but I think that selection process is still governed by like this underlying evolutionary process.
Yeah.
Like,
here's a question for you, Rebecca. So if I make a decision subconsciously, would you call that determinism? Like tea or coffee just because it's a preference, that's you'd call a subconscious decision determinism?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, because not to just disagree with you, but I would not call a subconscious decision determinism, because it's still me. It's just I didn't have the voice in my head say it.
What are you, George?
Yeah, I consider myself my whole brain. The conscious, the subconscious, it all together. So for me, I would still say a subconscious thought is still you. It's just there's a lot more to you than just your consciousness.
And well, I have so Rebecca, I assume that you're so you know monoist and dualists, right?
Yeah.
You would be a monoist, right?
Yeah, like I mean, I think I'm a monoist.
Yeah, okay. Because I had asked Danny this, but I had structured it incorrectly. I forgot what the
I don't
way
think
in which to explain
there's
it.
separation.
I think I'm also a monolist.
Monoism is where you believe that consciousness is structured by, I guess, neurons crossing in the circuitry within our brains, whereas dualists believe that consciousness is not a product of the material world, essentially. Like it exists on the outside.
Yeah,
No,
definitely say that.
No, that's not what a
A
dualist is.
dualist, yeah.
What is it? What is a dualist?
That's what a dualist believes,
Oh,
that
okay.
the mind and body are separate.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, so I asked that to Danny a couple sessions ago, but I asked it incorrectly. And then I think at the very end, I asked it correctly. So I just want to make sure I had that idea right. I had another thing to bring up, and I just lost it whenever I just kind of got derailed.
Just think of Danny.
I derailed myself. Think of Danny.
He does that too often already, Frank. Don't worry.
Oh man. Okay. Maybe if we can get my brain train running again.
Yeah.
What were we just talking about before? I kind of yeah. Okay, so George was talking about how he doesn't think that subconscious.
It's not you, or he thinks it's all of
It
him.
is. It is still you, and we are.
Yeah, I was saying that like your subconscious thoughts are still you. It's just it's still your preferences. It's still your brain. But it might not be the voice in your head. That's all.
I think this is where just we get into semantics, because it's just how do you define you? This much is me, and that's another person only this much is me.
Yeah.
I had something that was relative to like what is you, but god damn it, I completely forgot what it was. I'm hurt because it was I thought it was a good question.
What I want to know is I guess I want to get more clarified with Peterson's views on this stuff again, because I know he also likes to think about things from an evolutionary perspective, but sometimes I feel like he gives too much weight into evolutionary things.
As opposed to like logic, or
exactly, as opposed to logic. Because he keeps talking about religion and how it derived this way, and then a lot of the things he says are very interesting and true and relatable, but I don't feel it's for him, it's that's the only way to see things. Sometimes I feel like that's how he thinks.
Yeah, I think that's why I see Harris, even though he's a neuroscientist, it's at least my limited knowledge of both of them, I see him as trying to take a logical process, start from scratch, where Peterson is looking at everything as a scientist and he keeps finding patterns. And he's trying to, he's working from there and trying to keep finding the more meta pattern, the meta pattern, the meta pattern that'll get him to the core. And it's him.
Peterson is or Harris?
This is Jordan's, I think, path.
Okay.
And it's more scientific than logical like Harris. And I think they're both trying to arrive at the same place, but they're doing two different methods. Sam more logical and Jordan more scientific by finding meta patterns and hopefully arriving at that core logic.
Yeah.
So I have an interesting thing on the way that they arrive on those, the way in which they reason. But I actually, so Rebecca, you asked what Jordan thinks about this, right? About this whole kind of free will discussion and things. So I've actually seen videos of him on this, and his perspective is that the only time in which determinism is in process is after we've set a ballistic action in motion and can't stop it. So once you've done something in the world, that is when determinism takes place. But prior
to that.
Yeah, he said prior to that, the way he sees it is that we have a world in front of us, and we have, I mean, as far as we know, it is limited, but as far as we know, an infinite amount of potential.
Yeah, that's his favorite word, potential.
We're able to actualize that potential into the world and change the fabric of reality by doing so. But that's as far as what he believes. He thinks that the conscious mind kind of has a lot of power over, I guess, deliberation and what we do, but he doesn't believe that anything is determined before that. He's had a discussion with Michael Shermer on this as well, and
right.
He has his own little video about it.
One of the problems with all of this is that you talk about the path has an infinite potential, and we make the path is already so chaotic and so complex, we can't possibly measure a difference we make on it in the future. So, what he was saying about global warming is the graph doesn't look like this. The potential graph looks like that. There's the potential. But it could go, now if we make a change here, well, how do we measure what effect that had? Because you've the variation in the results right now is so much that if we make a small change, we actually don't know what effect we had.
I don't I don't think like Sam Harris either is saying that like we can predict the future. Like
no. That wasn't my point at all. I was saying that when we've got a landscape of potential ahead of us, let's say a road of potential pathways, the changes we make now, we might think, oh, you know what? I'm going to go and get my pilot's license, and I'm going to go and do that for a living. Now, in a way, that's a little bit easy to measure, whether you got your pilot's license, whether you do that for a living. But because of how chaotic the path is, it's impossible to measure it's a very difficult thing to prove or disprove that, because the path is so chaotic that you don't know what each little action, where each little action led to.
I think that's why he harps so much on planning for the future.
Yeah.
Right? So he has his future authoring program and things like that. And then I think that's also why the way in which he compensates for what you just said, George, is that he says that, life is suffering. And there eventually you're going to suffer. And so, just take that into consideration. Everyone's going to have kind of heavy burdens. And so when you're planning, I don't know. I think that's why he harps on that.
I totally agree with him. Like Jordan Peterson, make a plan, but you are not going to get to the end of that plan, because you might get a little bit along it, and then the path has changed. So you modify the plan as you go. So
I don't think Sam would make that assumption, though, that the landscape is chaotic, because it would be deterministic.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Sam or Peterson makes a lot more assumptions based on just evolutionary principles and stuff. And I think he does that because he's a psychologist, and his whole purpose is to help people, give them some kind of manual to follow and something that they could go out and do right now, take action to make valuable changes where they could see results. Whereas Sam's goal is to just make people think more critically about things. So he doesn't focus as hard on
in a way, Peterson is a bit more of a behavioralist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's very real, the fact that we have potential in order to change the fabric of reality right in front of us. So you could go shoot someone with a gun and you change the reality in front of you immediately, and their own reality. And we have a lot of power as human beings, right? I mean, you completely change the direction of where you're going if you go shoot someone in the face with a gun. Or if you set a plan to lose some weight and then you start to diet every single day, taking sequential steps in order to come to that particular conclusion. I don't know. I really think that we have a lot of power to kind of change the direction in which we're going.
In a way, it's kind of fortunate that there is a certain level of determinism, because if there wasn't, there's no guarantee you'd lose weight if you did all the right things. Whereas in the world we do live in, that it's not deterministic that if you work hard at school, you're going to get into Harvard, right? That's not a guarantee. But the only way of getting into Harvard is to work hard at school.
Yeah, there's a lot of variability. I understand what you're saying.
There's successful traits that put you on a path, and the paths are not like that. The paths are like that. Mm-hmm. So it's like you can be on the right path, but you can get unlucky. So you end up at the bottom of that path instead of the top of that path. Right. And we're fortunate that the world does have a level of determinism that if you do the right things, bad things can still happen, but you're far better off to have done the right things and have bad things happen than do the wrong things and have,
things happen.
So question, do you think, because we kind of hinted it, I don't know if we said it explicitly, but what if that consciousness itself is evolutionary? Like, it's not just we're selecting for creatures that are more conscious. It's that through selection, consciousness emerged. Like, that's the result of evolution.
That's what Jordan said.
Yeah, in a fight, the conscious being is going to win every time, because the thing is if humans are conscious and say tigers are not, we know to avoid them.
Figure out, and it's not that. It's not conscious versus non-conscious. I'm just saying consciousness itself emerged. Like the same way, I don't know, fish develop. I don't know the way it works, but let's say fish develop legs to walk on land, and then we developed consciousness. It's not that we became more conscious. It's that it was born out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think consciousness is a result of biological consciousness.
Biological evolution, yes. Yeah.
Wait, can you say that first part, Rebecca, again?
Biological evolution.
As opposed to...
anything
else?
I don't know.
Well, honestly, I sometimes think that the internet is a conscious being itself. It's not emotional. It's not hungry. It's not all of these things. But I think what consciousness is not like a little brain in your brain. It's the fact that you're your whole brain, and there's a lot of these thoughts going from part to part. So you can't actually think an individual thought. But where your experience of that thought is when it's going around your brain, when it's connecting to another part of your brain. Because when most of our neural connections between different parts of our cortex go through one area, the corpus callosum. So in a way, it's that sort of, I think consciousness is the way that information is passed along and filtered out. Because you have a lot of, you think a lot of things before you actually say anything or do anything or react. So even when you're scared, you have a lot of thoughts before you actually get that physiological reaction. So I think what consciousness is the exchange of information, and then you're exchanging information on the internet with computers and stuff. So I think what the internet is a very primitive form of synthetic consciousness. And it's creepy. The ads you get are creepy, but no one's sitting there listening to you thinking, oh, I know what he'll like, right? There's not enough people in the world to do that. But you say to your friend, oh, remember that time skiing? And then you get a bunch of ski ads, because it's looking at what you're looking at, and it's got a goal. It's mission orientated to get you to click on things and buy things. It's got algorithms that help you do that. I don't think it's a little thing with a voice in its head that that is going to go rogue and become a Cylon and nuke humanity, and then. But I do think that the internet does have its own thoughts, because no one's sitting there sending you ads. It's entirely done by the internet itself.
We're the genetic makeup of the internet.
Yeah, I mean, again, if consciousness is simply the exchange of information through our brain, then in a way you could say old post offices had that same sort of consciousness, but it wouldn't have been clearly, it's like it's post going through, but the people who worked there would have experienced a great connection to all places in the world, because things would come in, moved on, and then that in itself, it's like, oh, I got a letter from here and it's going there. It's like that in itself is information. You don't open the letter to see what the information was that was passed on, but so in a way, yeah, I do think the internet has its own thoughts, but it's just not with a voice. It's not with a little Cylon voice or anything.
Oh, did you have something to say, Rebecca?
No, I do have to go though as well.
Oh, sorry.
So,
well, it was nice talking to you.
no, I'm glad we had that chat. I would definitely talk more about it. I'm gonna read up. Like I've been busy, like super busy, but I'm gonna since I enjoy reading about this stuff anyway, and I'm gonna read more. And then if you guys want to talk about it in the future, if just you want to talk about it, I can always talk more.
Yeah, I'd like to talk more about, because I get a lot of design ideas and ideas for machines that I could build, and I don't know where I get them from.
Right.
Really don't know where I get them from. so it's interesting to me.
But I have to head out now.
Yeah.
All right.
Enjoy. Peace. Nice chatting. Nice seeing you.
For sure.
See ya.
I'm gonna get going too, because I've got a job interview in the morning, and
it's late over there.
Next Wednesday.
You should tell us so we can apply for it too.
It's a research position for soil.
Yeah. I'm applying for a job as a first officer on an Airbus A220. So it's 18 months training if I get the job.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And a shitload of debt, but I'll take the debt if I can, because I get to fly for a living. But
your paintings were super nice, by the way. That was really cool. I didn't know you were an artist.
Oh yeah, those are sick.
Yeah, sorry. This one, you can see the rest of them on Instagram if you like.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, george.holt.youtube. But this one I've just been working a bit more on all weekend.
Oh, the
I
frog.
don't even know if I have you guys all on Facebook or something, but I'll add you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, George Holt, HOLT.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, have a good one.
All right, George.
Yeah, have a good one, guys. I'll talk to you next week.
All right.
Definitely.
See you next week.
Cheers.
Cheers.
It's just me and you, Frank.
Yeah.
I actually. Do you have time?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Because I had some interesting stuff to ask Rebecca, but she left, and I was like, damn it! I had some stuff. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you can tell I'm really into this conversation. This is something I've thought a lot about. I don't know if you can tell on that one too.
I'm about it.
I thought about this for months, honestly, because like I said, the thought of everything being sort of determined, the implications of that, they didn't sit right with me. Intuitively, it didn't sound right. And then also I was like, well, that seems to be a bit unnerving. And I mean, as we've kind of tried the logic with the group, it seems as though Rebecca and Danny seem to be, well, I don't know along what spectrum Danny is a determinist, but those two seem to be determinists. Whereas you, George, and I kind of reside on a different, I guess, within a different perspective, because you and George, from what I've deduced in this conversation, I mean, I think it's been pretty reliably shown that you guys are compatibilists, where you guys think that, as you said, there are kind of two intersect, or there's like an intersection wherein the evolutionary kind of deterministic stuff comes, and then another like place from where consciousness comes, and they intersect.
Yeah, I feel like maybe it's like a spectrum. So let's say you're always using 100% of a combination of your default and your unconscious and your conscious. And as you get older, you become more self-aware. You start using more of your conscious, and I think that's what growth is all about. It's self-awareness.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And one thing I found interesting when I was thinking about it, I thought, people say, well, we're kind of swayed in all different sorts of directions by particular influences that essentially tell us what to do. So, like this sign over here up to the left, this McDonald's sign is colored in a particular way, wherein it will interact with the psychology of our brains and make us want to go toward that more, right? And I would say, well, what if you're aware of that, though? What if you're aware of those, psychological tricks that different advertisement companies like enact upon us? And it's like, well, then what?
It gets deeper.
And then to what degree? That's why I always say, to what degree are we determined? Because it's like, what if you're aware of this? What if you're aware of that? What if you're aware of your mental state, wherein, you're mad and you're arguing with somebody, but you immediately become aware of your anger and how it could influence what you say to this person, and so you stop and you say, wait, I'm going to maybe go cool down in the other room before I interact with you, or something, to that effect. This anger is going to influence the way in which I speak to you.
Yeah, I don't know. Like currently, I feel like from a Harris perspective, I can't prove logically determinism or its opposite. But let's say Jordan, or scientifically from a pattern perspective, I lean toward compatibilism because it's crazy. Like this parallel keeps reoccurring, like the chaos and order, the default and non-default, subconscious. It's just like levels of the same parallel happening again. So it's like if I had to place a bet, I'm gonna bet on this pattern.
Right, and gosh, my nose is getting all stuffy. Yeah, I agree. Like from Harris's perspective, I can't logically, or how you did you say logically arrive, or yeah, logically arrive at the conclusion of determinism, or the opposite. Again, my biggest problem was that this was unfalsifiable. You can't disprove it. Like if you can't disprove this, or you can't prove or disprove, I don't understand how you can say it with such conviction that this is matter of fact. I know this. This is axiomatic. Like, well, you can't. What's your proof, and to what degree?
And I think Danny is actually more compatibilist, actually, than deterministic. But
yeah, that confused me.
He's just pushing it. He's just pushing it like even deeper. Oh shit! What was I gonna say? So, because like one thing that he brought up, because like we talked about this in like previous weeks. Like something he brought up was how the abstraction could affect the material world. So now we start playing with semantics a little bit. What do we mean by determinism? So like, is like where you're playing pool, something affects something, but is this only limited to matter? Because if we can say the abstraction or ideas or the immaterial affects matter, does that also fall under determinism?
Mm-hmm.
Because
right.
If it does, then I think a lot of people would be determinists. Because then even us, oh, here you go, your consciousness is affecting the matter. I'm determinist.
Right, and then with the so I would say,
but traditionally it's always only matter affects matter.
Right.
I don't
Right.
think
So
the
it's,
determinists believe the abstraction can affect matter. But there's no. It's like you said. It's unfalsifiable. At least seen
right.
so far.
I don't. Yeah, and I don't like that. I don't like that it rests upon um, that the case that it's kind of the unknown. So therefore, I'm going to make a determination as to what this is. And so to say that you essentially create a domino effect um, as a consequence of abstractions from the consciousness. I mean, I don't think that's completely incorrect, but as far as, because I mean, what we do, like what we create from our consciousness and put out into the world has a cause and effect. But I would say, as far like, I would agree with Jordan that we create kind of that cause and effect, and again, we have an environment wherein there is an infinite amount of potential to us anyway. Um, where we can actuate that, we can actualize that potential, and I don't know. He was talking about how in his wilder moments he gets to a point to where he refers to it as you can step into different dimensions of reality by committing different sorts of actions. And I would again say that because we have consciousness, we're free from that kind of just hard cause and effect.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this thing caused you to do this 100%. It's like, maybe I would say that it made me take it into consideration, but I wouldn't say that it caused me to do this particular thing.
And we don't. As Jordan would love to say, we don't behave as if we're deterministic.
Not even the determinists behave as if they're deterministic.
Exactly.
Which doesn't make any sense to me.
So he would say, Jordan would say, because belief is based off of actions, like how you live. He would say determinists don't really believe determinism because they don't act like they believe in determinism.
That's exactly my point too. I sit there and I think, well, you don't live as if we're in a deterministic universe, and you don't treat others as if they are determinist. Well, I wouldn't say deterministic universe, but I would say you don't live as if your actions are based on determinism, and you don't treat others as if their actions are based on determinism.
Well, actually, let me take that back. I don't want to say that. It's like the perfect, I don't know, plot hole on both sides. Like, that was a really good comeback. But then the determinist would just say, for example, because like we would say, for example, if somebody robbed a determinist should not call the police, right? But then the determinist would say, "Oh no, I'm only calling the police because it's deterministic."
Right. Yeah. Well, that's what I don't. As I said, I don't like a lot of things about this because it's kind of like, really, it's easily circular.
Yeah.
It just plays into itself over and over again. But I mean, the fact that Sam Harris constantly is like trashing on Donald Trump as if he has free will and he deliberately does things, right?
But then that would be the reply. He's only bashing on him because he doesn't have a choice but to bash on him.
I would say that he sits here and makes a case for us to be more empathetic and understanding to people so that we don't react that way. Because I've listened to like a lot of Sam Harris, and I listened to a lot of Sam Harris like pretty much dunking on Donald Trump, and he does not act as if this guy is just a consequence of his genes and his kind of environment. He sits there and he puts so much accountability to him and so much blame, and he does it deliberately, and that doesn't make sense to me because he talks so much about how determinism will help us engage in more empathy because we'll understand that everything is not anyone's fault at all.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you attribute so much accountability to Donald Trump then, since you're always just ragging on this guy? It's not even his fault. It's not his fault, and you're making the case for us to be hyper empathetic about everything. But see, so, and that's another problem I have. Like, we're gonna sit here and say, we're not the authors of really anything ever at all. It's like, so what role does I typed this out. I said, because I was going to ask Rebecca, what role does motivation or being proud of something or blame, what roles do those take in a deterministic universe?
Yeah.
It's like, why would I be motivated for anything if everything is already kind of predetermined? So Sam Harris said not to conflate fatalism with determinism, which I mean, if we're not responsible for anything ever at all, I don't understand. Like, I'm having such a hard time understanding his point of view. Like, why would we be motivated to do things?
Does motivation even genuinely exist?
There's that. Well, one of the cases he made is like, you're not responsible for the amount of effort that suddenly appears in your brain in order to go do something. And you're not responsible for how lazy you feel in a moment of being lazy. And I thought in my head, I was like, well, I don't just go do stuff when I'm inspired to do stuff. Like, I do stuff regardless of my mental state. Like, believe me, I don't like working out. I would much rather stay home, eat Doritos and Mountain Dew, and play fucking video games every day. I would much rather do that. That's so much more fun.
And still be ripped.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to just do that, but so it's like I have two options here. Well, I have more than two options, but it's like I can go work out, which I don't want to do at all. I have zero motivation to go do this. But despite my mental state on that, I'm still going to force myself to go and do this thing that is better for me, that I know will, in the future provide longevity, provide, all of these sort of benefits, versus if I go down this path of playing my games every day and eating what I want to eat every day, it's not going to be good for me later on. But that's what I want to do. I want to do that so bad. And I don't feel any motivation where I just jump up out of bed. I'm like, yeah, let's go work out. I want to go get fucking shredded or whatever. It's like, no, I don't want to do this. I'm going to fucking like drag my feet to the gym, and then I'm going to put a ton of effort into doing this shit. I don't drag my feet in the gym, but to the gym, I drag my fucking feet.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of like, I'm not motivated to go do things that are better for me that I don't want to do, but I force myself to do them anyways. Like, I fucking hate reading. It's so boring. Like, I absolutely cannot stand reading like anything but comic books, anything but manga.
Yeah.
Like that's all I like to read. But I sit there and I'm like, what is the best way for me to learn? And I've kind of gauged all the different directions that I can go with learning, and reading seems to be the most useful. I learn the most things that I know from books. So I'm like, okay, I don't want to do this, but I'm gonna fucking force myself because it's better for me, and it's gonna provide for, I don't know, just overall better things in the future.
Yeah.
So I wondered about that. And then as far as like being proud of yourself for something, like say you finally made it in life and you're like, yes, I have a family, if that's what your goal is, I've got these particular possessions and this security around me, right? Like I have financial security, I'm not in debt, all of this business, and you've worked hard as shit, like 100-hour weeks, whatever, slaving away, and you're finally in a position wherein you're actually secure. Well, what pride do you hold in that? It's just a consequence of your genotypical predisposition and sociocultural environment that resulted in you having more effort than the fucking guy that never wanted to get off the couch and lives on unemployment. So,
yeah, that's it.
Not your fault. Like, you didn't do that. You're not self-made. Like, and I'm just, I don't know. As far as like self-made goes, Sam Harris has like a different definition, but maybe everyone does.
Yeah, I would say that's the biggest problem for determinism and determinist is consciousness. Like, how do you answer that?
I would say, and that's why I said to Rebecca, I said, I think that these evolutionary impulses are a variable, but I think that they kind of bring something into consideration for you, and that's it. When consciousness comes into play, I would say that stops. And then from there, you create the cause and effect, the ballistic action, as Jordan would put it.
Mm-hmm.
He's convinced me the most, and you know the fact that so Jordan sometimes you know how he gets a little woo woo and stuff like that. So I kind of thought, well, you know, maybe he's not as realistic as I'd like to believe. So I kind of like went around to see what other people's thoughts were on free will, and Steven Pinker. I mean, he said, you know, yeah, just because of the unpredictability of humans, like we can't predict someone's behavior off of a prior set of, like, say, causes or what have you. We can't do that at all. No chance. I mean, I have a tangent to go off on that, but I'm not going to right now. And then you know Eric Weinstein. He's one of the most intelligent people that I've ever heard speak on this, and all he said was like, and this resides with my argument that this is unfalsifiable. He says we don't even have the tools with which to measure how determinism like plays in within humans, like as far as you know how it plays in the whole equation of you know your environment, your genes, and consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
We do not have the tools with which to measure that. So what are we talking about? He's like, we've been talking about the same thing for the past couple hundred years, and it's not changed, and it's not become more interesting. So I mean, I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And Brett Weinstein, I mean, like what he said, you know, the genes, we make a special place for these genes that want to uphold homeostasis and further their own code or what have you into the future. We make a special place for them, but that's not all that we do. So I was like, okay, well, these guys are more, I would say, down to earth, a bit more down to earth than Jordan can be.
Yeah.
So I like, I don't know. I take all of these things into consideration, and then I think I've come to the conclusion that, like you guys, it's like, well, the environment, yeah, there are certain determinations in front of you, but when it comes to consciousness, that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, I think we touched on this a couple of weeks ago, and that was kind of where we left it at. It's like, look, at least to me, it's either two things. Either we're not deterministic and we should be pursuing our best life, or we are deterministic and there's no point.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's exactly the conclusion that I come to. And when you go to like say someone who is a determinist, and you know you ask them, well, what's the meaning of life then? If fucking everything's determined, why do anything? Like they'll do some sort of dance around the question to make you not feel nihilistic, but it's like completely unsatisfying. It makes no sense, and it like contradicts itself. Like at the end of Sam Harris's video, he was talking about, he actually addressed that question. So why do we do anything? And then he started talking about like these kind of micro choices that you can make, and I was like, well, you just made a whole video about how we can't make choices and it doesn't matter, but now you're saying that, you know, appealing to reason and this and that, and it's like, well, what if someone's predispositions and sociocultural environment has molded them into a person wherein their appeal to reason does not work on them? Then what?
yeah, like
they're just a lost cause.
Yeah, this is like why I want to read his books. I think I've seen in a video that he's gotten tired of talking about it, and he's like, look, man, if you want to have this discussion, just go read my book.
Honestly, I read reviews on his book before. I actually read it myself, and all of them were like, this was unsatisfying. Like, you wrote this in like 70 pages, and you think like this is enough to explain what you're saying? Like, this is not enough.
Yeah.
And as far as, I mean, you see me right now, I'm contending with like everything he's saying. I'm like, I don't buy it, man. Even having read his book. So,
like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm just like, I did. I mean, for a minute there, like, I was just like, well, maybe you've convinced me, man. And then I came to the conclusion. I was like, well, why do anything, you know? And I was like, maybe I need to hear more people speak on it, and then maybe I need to think critically on this particular thing. And then I did, and then I just kind of, again came to the conclusion that I don't really buy it, and acting in the world as if you have free will and treating others in the world as if they have free will. So you behaving as if the other is true kind of insubstantiates your own argument, because what is that backed by? When you're making an argument but you're acting in a completely different way, it's just backed by your words. Like you don't like you don't act like you believe it. So like, do you believe it? Like, are you just saying it? Like,
where are you at?
Yeah, exactly. Where are you at? What's going on? Like, this is still so unclear, and I don't know. I feel like he went pretty in depth in his video, but not in depth enough. And I also so one thing I kind of wait. Actually, I gotta go pee real bad, real quick.
Yeah,
so,
do your thing. I'll be here.
Yeah, I'm gonna break away just for a minute.
All right. Okay.
All right. But so I had actually wondered a couple things on top of I don't know, I guess the questions that I've already had. And again, yeah, I wanted to ask mainly Rebecca these questions because she's a pretty hard determinist. I also had the question of like what role blame would play and like accountability would play in a universe of hard determinism.
Or even just like the legal system.
Right, exactly. And the way that Sam Harris has actually addressed that is he said, we'd have to be more empathetic and understanding that people are just a product of their biological and sociocultural environments. Like they're just a product of those things. And so essentially what he's saying is that blame would not be attributed to anybody for anything ever at all.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, that doesn't fly with me. That makes no sense. That's to say that we're not, well, the whole determinist argument is that we're not in control of our own decisions and we're never able to kind of deliberate upon a multitude of things in order to make, say, a better decision, what we deem as better, what could be objectively better. I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me. So.
No, yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. It's just.
Well, and Jordan had referenced this before. He said, why is it that anytime we've tried to create a society based upon the structure of determinism, it's either collapsed into totalitarian state or completely crumbled. So why is there no continuation? He said that Sam Harris's counter to that would be, well, whether it's successful or not, it doesn't change the rule. And it's like, well, I think it kind of does, doesn't it?
It gives more weight to Jordan's argument. So it's like, and it's the same thing if you, for example, like communism, I don't think that's the perfect solution, even though it does have some validity. How should I say this? It's like, talking about determinism. It's like, to me, it's like this. It's like, it's a video game. You have a level 10 weapon. And you can only use it if you're level 10. Or like a chainsaw. You won't give a kid a chainsaw, but an adult can use it. If you give it to a kid and the kid hurts himself, do you say, oh, see, the chainsaw is useless because kids keep hurting themselves? I would say no, they're just not good enough. That would be the counter to Jordan's argument. It would be, well, every society fails, or say with communism, we keep seeing it fail. To me, that's why I still lean towards Jordan, because we see the pattern or something there. But that's not a logical proof, because I could give that counter. Maybe we just weren't ready for that, and now we are.
Thank you. What I would wonder, because like what the scientific method kind of rests on, how we define what is most true, like we had this discussion before. What it rests on is things to be reliably replicable. And so if something crashes down every single time, we wouldn't determine that is true. We would say that the hypothesis is incorrect, right?
Yeah.
You couldn't form a theory from that. Well, a theory that the hypothesis is true.
Yeah, or at the very least, we would say, in this context, that determinism appears to be the least true. And that would be the conclusion. That would be my conclusion.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and I wondered I thought it was kind of strange that the belief that Danny held. And I'm not trying to take shots at him when he's gone.
Do it. Take shots. Yeah, I'm gonna Danny, this is for you.
Right, he's gone. Say anything bad. No, so like last time, we had a conversation. Not the last time, but maybe it was a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago. He and I were debating on, gender. What exactly determines gender?
Oh, yes.
Right, and the basis for his argument was that he doesn't believe that like sort of genotypical predisposition combined with sociocultural environment shapes you
or shapes your behavior.
Right, as strongly as I had claimed. I think that there are particular parts of you that are hardwired. But essentially what I got from what he was claiming is that that's not true.
Yeah, so okay, this is like I always enjoyed talking with Danny, because multiple times like we've just talked after everyone else had to go, and in that particular week you're referring to, again we spoke after, and thing is Danny has like a deeper, a more fundamental philosophy. So anytime like the gender, or I think even in this case with free will, you have to like go down deeper and like critique his fundamental philosophy to make any headway.
Okay.
So with that, all right, and he can correct me if I'm doing this incorrectly, but in regards to the gender thing, he kind of went down to our consciousness is software and our body is hardware. Those are two different things. But to me, and we kept talking, and I kept trying to get clarity. I mean, because he's also perfecting his philosophy. He's fully articulating it. He's still refining it.
Right.
And I was just trying to get a better understanding to see if it's consistent.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I think he lacks, or either his philosophy lacks, or maybe he just doesn't have enough clarity in it, it's that it's like there's this line between software and hardware, but to me that's mad blurry. Like what if they're actually along a continuum? You can't really do that. And he kind of went to a different parallel with like information. And this is this kind of like idea of emergence. So for example, you have a picture of the Mona Lisa and you have a painting of the Mona Lisa. Now, if you look at a picture, let's say a digital picture on your computer, it's really just LEDs and it's really just forms of light being emitted, da-da-da-da-da. If you look at a painting, it's really just oil on the cloth and so on and so forth. But what's emerging out of it is a picture. They're both trying to convey a message. And it's like this idea. And it's just manifesting physically in different ways.
Okay.
So there's the information, and then there's the medium. And that's kind of like I believe he was describing, there's information, which is software, then there's the medium, which is hardware. But the problem is that line is not, it's not obvious.
Right, yeah.
Because a medium in itself can be information. Like, who defines what's information and what's a medium?
And I would say, I mean, for me, I would argue. So I would argue the degree to which hardware kind of defines us and our particular behaviors. I would say that it's actually more than he would. Well, that's what had happened in that conversation.
Yeah.
That I said it was to a higher degree. He said that it was to a lower degree. But as far as like relative to this conversation, well, what is software?
Exactly. So, in terms of the free will discussion, so software would be our conscious. That's right. What he would. I believe that's what Danny would say. And the problem is all the predispositions. The same way with like the gender discussion. I think Danny would say that our genetics wouldn't have a significant role in our free choice mechanism.
And that doesn't. Decision. That's not compatible with determinism. So that's why, like, I was really surprised that when I messaged the group, I said I had contentions. The reaction that Danny had, I was like, wait, what? I was like, we had a discussion about this, about the freedom within, your gender expression or what gender you are, and you were.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, guys. It's fun to see Danny, like, he kind of plays the devil's advocate because he just wants to push it deeper. And I'm just like, I know where you're going with this, man. So yeah,
Oh man. I guess I don't know. I don't know if I have a limited amount of brain power. I don't know if I want to ask him next time. I was sitting here and I was worried about this conversation coming in because I kind of have a headache today. I don't really want to do this. I'm gonna have to use a lot of my fucking brain to have this discussion. It's like it goes so deep. I was like, God, man.
fine.
Yeah. I was like, all right, fine, we'll just do this. Because like I said, I really have thought a lot about this, and even at the end, we didn't really come. I mean, me and Danny were just like
Back
we
and
couldn't.
forth.
Yeah, and we couldn't like really like he would say something, I would say something back, and then like what we kept saying, like we were both like, no, like this is relative, like this works within this kind of world or what have you, and I feel like we would have just been talking in circles for the next couple of hours if we would have kept going on. I don't know. Because the place that we ended, even with Rebecca's a hard determinist. I mean, I had kind of prodded that more, and we still ended up in disagreement.
Yeah. No, this is what
Well,
it is.
and Sam Harris made the case that determinism, reason is good within determinism because reason makes us all slaves. We're all subject to reason, and that's why determinism and all that is compatible. And I thought, well, hold on. Like you and Jordan Peterson sat there and debated for like 6 hours about like what like you are both very logical, like sequential thinkers, right? You're both very reasonable people with probably very high IQs, right? I mean, I'm sure it would be insanely hard to argue with either one of them about anything ever because they've just spent so much time on what they think, and it's like you guys have both spent so much time on what you think. You're both reasonable and rational, and yet you've come to very radically different conclusions on so many different things. So you say we're all subject to reason, and that's why it's good. Determinism and reason kind of go hand in hand, but it's like I don't know what you mean by that. Like different reasonable people come to different conclusions through reason. And that's kind of how he plants morality.
Yeah,
And
in conjunction with determinism.
right, and he says, we can all objectively agree on, say, conditions of the least amount of suffering and the highest amount of pleasure, or something like. I don't know if he said pleasure, but he said something along those lines.
Because I know he likes the word well-being.
Yeah, maybe it was well-being. Maybe it wasn't pleasure. But yeah, and I just kind of thought, and I was like, oh man, that's so loaded, man. Like if we're all so subject to determinism and reason, and that's why these things are good. Why have like the greatest minds in the world all come to different conclusions on different sorts of philosophical questions and things like that? Like I'm not understanding this because wouldn't we all arrive upon the same conclusion in this sort of world wherein everyone is actually subject to objective reason? I mean, that's what I would think. We would all come upon the same conclusions, right?
At least we would know, like what we did. At least I think where we both stand. We know what's definitely true, and then we can all lean different ways, and that's fine if people like lean different ways because you don't have all the evidence. But for stuff that you do know or you do have evidence for, like logical proofs for, we should agree on that.
We should, but we don't.
Yeah.
That's my whole thing. It's like
If you didn't reason enough, it's a
yeah,
process.
yeah. like they're God. I don't know. Just and so many people get so many different conclusions that again are very high level thinkers. They get so many with the same exact row of evidence, they both will come to different conclusions based on that. And it's like, well, I thought we were all subject to reason, objective reason. Like, what the fuck? Who am I supposed to believe and listen to when it comes to certain things? Like,
You gotta ask Sam.
Yeah, ask Sam Harris, so he could throw me in a loop. I don't know, and again, like him talking about how there are micro choices that we can kind of make within this world of determinism. At the very end of the video, I was like, because he asked himself the question or what have you, like, well, why does anything matter? Why would we do anything? Why would we strive for good?
Yeah.
And then he talked about micro choices that you can make within your life. And Jordan once said, eventually what happens, we can say free will, but eventually what happens in that sort of discussion, when anybody talks about choices, it'll come down to that. It'll be synonymous with free will, whatever somebody is advocating for when it comes to, say like, oh, well, why do anything or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to just come right back to it.
Yeah, that and like morality, like those two are always in the same conversation.
Yeah, and I don't even know what to think about. Like, some people believe in objective reality, some people believe in subjective reality, and I don't know if these are like substratas of, say, philosophy, or what these things are. But for me, like philosophy, I can't stand it. It throws me in like such a like, because there are not like materialist bases upon which these arguments are built. I feel like in philosophy, it's like, well, what is, just like determinism, free will, right? We couldn't kind of pinpoint this materialistic sequence by which these things operate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, we could to a degree, but I don't know if it's enough. And that's why I guess I like, that's why I like science, because it's like, well, there's some material behind it. There are things that you can show me to prove that, say, this, like we had that discussion that gravity exists, right? I guess my whole point was reliable replication. Like, you can show me, I guess, that it will at least do the thing. And that's why, I don't know, I guess that's a strong argument for gravity, or for this scientific theory, or for that scientific theory, because you can show me the thing happening over and over and over again.
Yeah, like, I don't know, I feel like once we get a better understanding of the abstract, the abstraction of reality, and like the relationships going on there, we'll be able to answer questions about.
I mean,
And what I'm referring to is kind of like consciousness. Like, once we start getting a grasp of that, like, what does it mean to be conscious, and all of that, we'll be able to answer more of these deterministic ideas.
yeah, and it's like, well, are we ever going to understand something like that? Like, I sit there and I wonder. I hope so, but it's like, people have been asking these same questions for so long, and we've even like we've become so technologically advanced, and it's like, we still don't seem to be any closer to figuring out what the hell, what the answers are to certain questions regarding consciousness and things like, people will say like, well, what about like love and music and these things that cause these unexplainable reactions within our brain chemistry and make us want to like dance or do this or do that. Like, we have these incredible tools with which to measure so many things, but we seemingly have not come any closer to answering these particular, I guess, maybe what is love is a philosophical question. I don't know.
Yeah, and I wish I had more time to think about it, because this past week or two was not my most free weeks, but yeah. I don't know. Maybe next week I'll have some new ideas on it.
You know, I don't know this type of stuff. Like I said, I don't like philosophy because it seems to just demand so much fucking like strain up here, and I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, so like, we did it this week and it's cool. I'm not crazy about doing like the same topic over again if we don't have any like progress, if we're just going in circles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's why, like, again, I like arguments that are just kind of substantiated in the material, because at least we can point to, these particular citations of evidence in order to prove our point, whether something works or doesn't work.
Mhm.
We can say, well, it's been tried here, it's been demonstrated here a multitude of times, and so, therefore, it does work or it doesn't work, or the studies show this or the studies show that, right? Of course, there are a plethora of problems with those, but they seem to be more just easily grounded.
Yeah, and at least it's providing direction as
Yeah,
well.
right. And we can have just a more solid discussion. And I think that things come to an eventual end in those sort of discussions, whereas this thing could go on forever. It has been going on for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And it's still going on. So
Yeah.
it's like, oh, man. Shit.
Let me
But,
stop recording this.